So this is an experiment I was working on. I set up a camera on a tripod. These are all, so this is a camera raw straight out of the Sony. It has its own Sony compression. It's not uncompressed raw, which I also want to experiment with later. This is a Lossy DNG that I made, and this is the in-camera JPEG. And so in this row, everything looks pretty much the same, right, as one would expect. And then each subsequent row is another row of underexposure. So this is a stop underexposed, 2 stops underexposed, 3 stops underexposed, 4 stops underexposed, 5 stops underexposed. So there are a few things I wanted to test. For one, what the file sizes of these are going to be, because the Lossy DNGs, the compression, is pretty amazing. I often cannot tell the difference between a Lossy DNG and a camera raw file, but if you look at the file sizes, this Lossy DNG is 7 megabytes. The compressed Sony raw file is 62 megabytes, and the out-of-camera JPEG is 11 megabytes. So the Lossy DNG is even smaller than the JPEG, even though it's much more versatile. And so the experiment I was interested in doing is just getting these way underexposed files, and for one, actually just looking to see what happens to compression when you way underexpose the Lossy DNG compression. So this is substantially, it's 19 megabytes, so it's substantially larger than the properly exposed version, though it's still quite small by comparison to the Sony RAW file, which is roughly the same in each case. And so the other thing, so let's just see what we can get out of these two. So, okay, so this is, how many stops do we say here? So it's correct exposure, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So 5 stops underexposed. So 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stops, 4 stops, 5 stops. Okay, so let's let the camera catch up, or the computer catch up here. So the JPEG, as you might expect, just it looks quite different in this case, just because it has all the corrections baked into it. The digital negative and the raw file look very similar, almost identical. And then let's look at these two together. So this is a open up 5 full stops, which is quite a bit. You could barely tell there's an image there without increasing the exposure 5 stops, when it looked basically black to your eye, without clicking the exposure button, +5. Okay, so compare these, and we're going to zoom into, let's see, so view, it's at 100. I'm going to go to 200, which is, I think, where it was by default when I went there. Okay, so these two files, for one, they look pretty good. They're 5 stops underexposed, and they look like pretty decent files, actually. For 2, okay, we have a fair amount of noise here now. The noise does look very similar between the two. I think I see a little bit of difference here compared to here, so the Apple stem. But just, it's really marginal. And the compression rate is just so drastically different. I've changed my entire workflow over to Lossy DNGs, just because it just saves so much space, and it seems to have like virtually all the benefits of shooting RAW. What it doesn't have is, at least at present, there isn't the option to use some of the new AI-based corrections, like with noise reduction. So that's one area that if that's something you use, you might want to consider not getting rid of your original raw file from your camera. But in this case, it just seems like there's really not a whole lot of reason not to just dispose of your regular raw files in lieu of a Lossy digital negative. Let's compare these. This is the properly exposed version, And as one might expect, there's not a whole lot of noise in this version. Image quality wise, I'm hard pressed to see a difference. And we saw with the +5 stops that the data that we want out of the file, the original file, is also in the Lossy DNG, or at least close enough for me. I think I might be able to see a little tiny bit of difference. I'm honestly having a hard time telling. And then let's see which one's which. I'm going to toggle the info. Okay, so on the left is the camera raw file, and on the right is the Lossy DNG. And though they look virtually identical, let's see what the file size difference is. Show in Finder. Okay, so these 10 DNG. Okay, so 7 megabytes versus 62 megabytes. That's really a huge savings. So there you go.